Hello, LAPCS scholars. It's Mr. Rowley here, and we are going to continue our uh, segue into American history. This time we're going to talk about, we're going to connect the dots between the colonial period and the revolutionary period. So now you understand what the colonies were, the English colonies, Mid-Atlantic colonies, the Chesapeake and Southern colonies. And now we're going to talk about how that relationship that they once had with England, the mother country, started to deteriorate by the end of this one and the following slideshows. So you are required to take your outline notes as you've been doing. So outline notes, similar to what you're going to see, and make sure you take a picture of them and send them to me, or send me or share a Google Doc with me. Okay, so Road to Revolution, 1754 to 1775. So New France. Now France gets into this. The first French explorers tried and failed to find a northwest passage to Asia, going to Asia for the markets to make money. New France included Canada, the entire Mississippi River Valley, and Louisiana. The French thus confined the British territory east of the Appalachians, which is where the 13 colonies essentially is. The French government provided little economic incentive for its citizens to settle in New France, although New France did include permanent settlements such as Montreal and Quebec, which are now in Canada, and its vast lands were very sparsely populated. Sparse means very few people lived there. So here is a picture, although it's not a very clear one, so that you understand. So this is English territory, this is French territory, this is also English territory here, and down here is Spanish territory. And what's important to understand is that even though the French territory was much, much bigger, there were far less French people living there. That becomes important later on. French settlers were mostly single men who quickly developed a lucrative or very, very um, um, profitable fur trade with the Native American tribes. The French fur traders developed a cooperative relationship, that means it was very friendly, with the Native American tribes. Unlike the British settlers, they did not build plantations, they did not build farms on lands claimed by Native American tribes. In other words, they were there mostly to trade with them. Jesuit priests made an effort to convert Native Americans to Catholicism, to Christianity. Unlike the Spanish, the Jesuits did not require Native American converts to move to missions where they would live. The Albany Plan of 1754, let me move myself out of the way. Benjamin Franklin recognized the need for greater colonial cooperation. His Albany Plan called for the colonial defense against French and Native American threats to frontier settlements being out in the country. It proposed the formation of a Grand Council of elected delegates to oversee common defense, Western expansion, and Indian relations. His famous Join or Die cartoon dramatically illustrated the need for greater colonial unity. So here is that illustration, the Join or Die. So these are all of the colonies right here, New England, New York, New Jersey, and so on. They were all cut apart. He's saying needed to get together, to join together. The Albany Plan failed because the colonial assemblies, or lawmakers, did not want to give up their autonomy or their independence. At the same time, the British government feared that colonial unity would undermine their authority. The French and Indian War of 1754 to 1763. What happened? The French and Indian War culminated with a long struggle between Great Britain and France for the control of the North American continent. France lost because of its absolute government, impeded development of New France by imposing burdensome economic and immigration restrictions. Great Britain won because its colonies were far more populous, like I said earlier, than those of New France. In 1754, Britain's mainland colonies contained 1.2 million people compared to just 75,000 inhabitants of New France. Have that big of a difference in population, there's almost no way you can win a war. During the French and Indian War, the Algonquin supported the French and the Iroquois supported the British. So there were two different major Indian tribes. Actually, they were both confederations. So if you think back to when we were talking about Native Americans, the confederations were groups of tribes, like the Iroquois or the Algonquin, who worked together, and they worked together on either side of the war. What caused the war? The French and Indian War began as a struggle for control of the upper Ohio River Valley. The French and Indian War was part of a wider struggle between Great Britain and France, which is known in Europe as the 7 Years' War. Why should we remember French and Indian War? So Great Britain emerged as the foremost, or number one, naval power. The Peace of Paris of 1763 ended the French power in North America. Britain took control of Canada, took control of Spanish Florida, and all of the French lands east of the Mississippi River. The French and Indian War left Britain with a huge debt, which will come into play. As a result, British leaders planned to impose revenue taxes on their American colonies. The French and Indian War awakened the colonists' sense of a separate identity away from Britain. So, as an illustration, this is before the war began in 1754. So here were the British American colonies. All of this yellow was French territory, okay? So look at it now. Look at it in 1763 after the war ended. The British took huge territories. Everything essentially that was once French. There's still this area here that was still controlled by Spain. The Proclamation of 1763. So now that the French had been removed, American fur traders and land speculators looked forward to exploiting the vast new lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. While the colonists wanted to expand into new territories, the British wanted to prevent land-hungry settlers from provoking hostilities or fighting with the Indians. The Proclamation of 1763 forbade settlers from crossing the crest of the Appalachian Mountains. Hardy settlers, people who just didn't care what the crown said, defied the prohibition or the law against it as they pushed over the Appalachian ridges into Kentucky and Tennessee. Okay, so that is the end of part 1. And please make sure you are doing the exit ticket, which after this, please make sure you complete your outline notes and share them with Miss Marks and I. And that should pretty much do it. So get to work.